Okay, so we're up to some special issues related to LIFO. And I'd just like to start this off with a little bit on where did LIFO come from to begin with. And it started back in the 30s, and it was approved for, few industries then. It did not become very popular until the 1970s. And most of you probably don't remember what was going on in the 70s, but it was kind of the oil crisis. We had two of them. This was a time where, there was an oil embargo against the U.S., and so they weren't shipping oil to us, and so there were gas lines. These are people lined up to get gas, it was kind of a crazy time. My husband's uncle was an insurance executive. He was up there and he wore a suit and just a regular guy. He got in a fist fight because someone cut him off in one of these lines. That's how crazy it was. He just wasn't going to take it. So this is sort of the scenario of where LIFO became popular. Why did it become popular? Because it was a period of high inflation. The price levels were rising, which meant that your older inventories would cost significantly less than the newer replacement items that you were buying now. So there was a lot of incentive for companies to adopt LIFO, where their cost of goods sold would be the last in, first out, the most recent items, and it would reduce their reported net income and their taxes, okay? And it was also a time of significant inflation, price level rising, and unemployment. This was called stagflation. It's a combination, of the high unemployment and the stagnation of the economy, stagflation. It was great. That's when I started to raise my kids. Wonderful. Okay, so that's when LIFO really got going. About half the companies, close to half the companies were using it at that point. It's dropped in popularity since then because international standards don't permit LIFO. And so you have a lot of multinational companies that would have to be keeping books one way for the U.S. and one way for everywhere else. They weigh that against the huge tax benefit. In the local area, you're likely to, if you end up working around here, mostly car dealers use LIFO, not so many others. Okay, so there's that the international standards don't allow it is one reason that not as many companies are using it. The other is that the price levels haven't really been rising that fast. There's not the same economic incentive. Okay, so a few terms you need to know. LIFO conformity rule. This came into being when LIFO came into being, because companies would say, oh, cool, we will use LIFO for reporting, and we'll report a nice low net income, and I'm sorry, let me start over. I wish I could edit, but I can't. Okay, so the company said, oh, cool, we will use LIFO for our tax purposes. And so to the tax authorities, we'll report a nice low income, pay lower taxes, and we'll have a better cash flow. But we will use another method for our reporting to our stockholders who want to see a higher net income. Well, early on, back in 1939, they said, oh no, LIFO conformity rule. If you use LIFO for your taxes, you got to use it for reporting too. Okay, that's the LIFO conformity rule. Okay, so that supposedly has been relaxed lately. I'm not sure quite exactly what that means, but it's probably not good. All right, so LIFO conformity rule, if you're using it for reporting purposes, if you're using it for tax purposes, you also have to use it for reporting purposes. LIFO reserve. You have a lot of companies that will use LIFO for their tax purposes, but another method for their internal decision making, which makes sense because it just, that's generally what happens. So when it comes time for the financial statements at the end of each period, the company has to adjust their books that are based on FIFO or average cost to the LIFO that's used for reporting and tax purposes. So the difference between the internal accounting for inventory and the external and tax accounting is called the LIFO reserve. And so there's an allowance account to reduce inventory from LIFO to whatever internal inventory method is used. And so the difference between the internal method and LIFO. It's generally adjusted to a contra inventory account called LIFO reserve or LIFO allowance. Let me get back and put up some so you can see what we're talking about here. Yeah, so what happens is you've got your, say you're using average cost for internal reporting and LIFO for external. You're going to make an adjustment of, you know, your cost of goods sold is going to vary. So you're going to go cost of goods sold, LIFO reserve, or allowance to reduce inventory to LIFO. And this allowance account would work similarly to an allowance, the allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, so the other terms that you run into here are the LIFO effect, and that's just the change in the allowance from one period to the next, okay? And obviously you got to disclose what you're doing here. Okay, so that's, those are two parts of sort of the issues related to LIFO. I'll continue with a couple of more issues in the next one.